Half the people alive today exist because of him. He also built the weapon that killed thousands in the trenches. And years after his death, a variant of his research was used to gas members of his own family. His name was Fritz Haber, and no figure in the history of science sits more uncomfortably between salvation and destruction. Fritz Haber was born on December 9, 1868, in Breslau, Prussia, now Wrocław, Poland. His family was Jewish, prosperous and well-established. His father, Siegfried, was a merchant dealing in dyes, pigments, and pharmaceuticals. His mother, Paula, died 3 weeks after giving birth to him. Siegfried never quite forgave his son for that. The boy grew up in a house where he was tolerated, but not fully accepted. When Siegfried remarried, he showered attention on his 3 daughters. Fritz was left at the edges. He attended the Johanneum School, then the St. Elizabeth Classical School in Breslau, institutions open to both Christian and Jewish students. He was bright, restless, and determined to be taken seriously. From 1886 to 1891, he studied chemistry at several institutions. A semester at the University of Heidelberg under Robert Bunsen, then at the University of Berlin, and finally at the Technical School in Charlottenburg. After graduating, his father expected him to return and join the family business. Fritz tried. It did not work. The two clashed constantly. Through Siegfried's connections, Fritz was sent to apprentice at several chemical firms. A practical education, but also a way to get the young man out of the house. What Fritz wanted was an academic career. And to improve his chances, he did something that would echo painfully through the rest of his life. He converted from Judaism to Lutheranism. In late 19th century Germany, a Jewish name on an application was a closed door. Fritz Haber decided he would rather change than be shut out. In 1894, at 25, he joined the Technische Hochschule in Karlsruhe as an assistant researcher. He worked on combustion reactions, then shifted toward physical chemistry and electrochemistry. Slowly, steadily, he built a reputation, not as a genius, but as a relentless, precise experimentalist. It took years before he found any real footing. The problem that would define his life was simple to state and staggeringly difficult to solve. The atmosphere is roughly 78% nitrogen, an element essential for growing crops. But atmospheric nitrogen is locked in a molecular bond so strong that plants cannot use it directly. For centuries, farmers depended on natural sources of fixed nitrogen: animal manure, guano, Chilean saltpeter. By the early 1900s, the world's population was growing faster than those sources could sustain. A famine of global proportions was not a distant threat, it was approaching. Several chemists had tried to force nitrogen and hydrogen to combine into ammonia, a usable form of nitrogen. All had failed at any practical scale. The reaction required enormous pressure and extreme heat, and even then, the yield was tiny. In 1909, in his laboratory at Karlsruhe, Haber, working with his assistant Robert Le Rossignol, finally cracked it. Using an osmium catalyst, temperatures of roughly 600 degrees Celsius and pressures of roughly 175 atmospheres, they produced ammonia from air and hydrogen, drop by drop. It was not much, but it was enough to prove it could be done. The German chemical company BASF took notice. Engineer Carl Bosch scaled the process to industrial production. His team, led by Alwin Mittasch, found that an iron-based catalyst worked at industrial scale, cheaper and more practical than the rare metals Haber had used in the lab. By 1913, the first factory was operating. The Haber-Bosch process, as it came to be known, could produce synthetic fertilizer on a massive scale. Today, it feeds roughly half the world's population. Nearly 50% of the nitrogen in human tissue traces back to this single chemical reaction. It is, by almost any measure, one of the most consequential inventions in history. Then came the war. When World War I broke out in 1914, Haber threw himself into the German cause, with a zeal that surprised even his colleagues. He signed the Manifesto of the 93, a public declaration of unconditional support for Germany's military actions, issued in October 1914. At 46, he volunteered for service and was given the rank of captain. He was appointed head of the chemistry section in the Ministry of War. Haber proposed something no military had attempted at scale, using chlorine gas as a weapon. He personally supervised the installation of 5,730 gas cylinders along a 4-mile stretch of trenches near Ypres, Belgium. He waited at the front for weeks until the wind turned in the right direction. On April 22, 1915, 168 tons of chlorine gas drifted across no man's land and into the Allied trenches. At least 1,000 soldiers died. Thousands more were injured, blinded, or permanently scarred. Haber returned to Berlin and attended a celebration in his honor. That same night, May 2, 1915, his wife, Clara Immerwahr, shot herself in the chest with his military pistol in the garden of their home. Their 12-year-old son, Hermann, found her dying. Clara was herself a chemist, the first woman to earn a doctorate in chemistry from the University of Breslau. The exact reasons for her suicide remain disputed among historians. She had been unhappy for years, isolated, professionally sidelined, and increasingly estranged from her husband. The gas attacks may have been a final breaking point, but scholars caution against reducing her death to a single cause. What is certain is that Haber left for the Eastern Front the next morning to oversee further gas deployments. After the war, Haber received the 1918 Nobel Prize in Chemistry, awarded in 1920 for the synthesis of ammonia. The decision was immediately controversial. Several Allied scientists boycotted the ceremony. The Nobel Committee acknowledged the controversy, but maintained that the ammonia process represented, in their words, the greatest benefit to mankind. The years after the war brought a slow unravelling. Haber led the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Physical Chemistry and Electrochemistry in Berlin. He remained a towering figure in German science, but the political ground beneath him was shifting. In 1933, Adolf Hitler came to power. The new regime demanded that Jewish employees be dismissed from government institutions. Haber, who had converted decades earlier, who had served Germany in war, who had won its highest scientific honors, discovered that none of it mattered. He was a Jew. That was the only fact the regime recognized. Rather than fire his Jewish colleagues, Haber resigned from the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute. He wrote to the government. He could not continue to serve an institution that judged people by their ancestry rather than their ability. It was, perhaps, the most principled act of his life. It came too late to change anything. He spent a few months in Cambridge, England, working in a borrowed lab. It was there, according to multiple accounts, that Ernest Rutherford refused to shake his hand. The wartime gas attack still unforgiven, even 13 years later. Chaim Weizmann, the future first president of Israel, offered him a position at the Sif Research Institute in Palestine. Haber accepted. He never arrived. On January 29, 1934, Fritz Haber died of heart failure in a hotel room in Basel, Switzerland. He was 65. His half-sister, Else Freiherrn, was traveling with him. In the years that followed, the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute he had once directed became associated with the development of Zyklon B, derived from cyanide-based pesticide research conducted at his institute in the 1920s. Modified into a lethal agent, it was used in Nazi extermination camps. Members of Haber's extended family were among those killed. He had spent his life trying to belong to a country that would not have him. He fed the world, and he poisoned it. He won the Nobel Prize, and scientists refused to shake his hand. He converted, and it changed nothing. He served and was discarded. No one captures the moral vertigo of modern science quite like Fritz Haber. The same knowledge that pulls nitrogen from the air to grow wheat can push chlorine across a battlefield to kill. The process is the same. The intention is everything. And intention, as Haber's life demonstrates, is not always enough. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and subscribe for more.